At 5:30 hours, an elite Russian naval infantry and airborne assault column crossed the line of departure in southern Ukraine. Based on intelligence suggesting the Ukrainian defenses were overstretched, Moscow ordered a rapid mechanized punch to break the lines. However, the Russian commanders were walking into a meticulously engineered trap. The column was forced into a tight, single-file formation because the surrounding terrain was too soft to support heavy armor. Unknown to the lead tank commander, Ukrainian forces had already mapped every inch of this narrow dirt corridor using high-altitude drones and satellite imagery, transforming the road into a geometrically perfect kill zone. The ambush officially began when a concealed Ukrainian anti-tank missile team fired upon the lead vehicle. The missile struck with devastating precision, blowing the tracks off the lead tank and leaving it burning as an immovable roadblock. Instantly, the forward momentum of the entire Russian assault column collapsed. Dozens of trailing armored personnel carriers and main battle tanks were forced to a chaotic halt, trapped in a steel traffic jam with no escape routes. Within 30 seconds, the Russian command network began to buckle under a frantic wave of overlapping radio transmissions and panic status reports. Exactly 90 seconds into the ambush, the first volley of pre-registered Ukrainian artillery shells began raining down. Because the coordinates had been dialed in days in advance, there was no need for spotting rounds or gradual adjustments. Heavy explosive shells shattered the road, sending razor-sharp shrapnel through the lighter armored troop carriers. Panic rippled through the column as the Russian infantry instinctively abandoned their vehicles, sprinting toward nearby tree lines for cover. However, those tree lines were secondary target zones, already seeded with anti-personnel mines and covered by interlocking machine gun fire. As the Russian troops dispersed into the mud, high-resolution thermal sensors mounted on Ukrainian drones tracked their body heat through the thick smoke. This allowed artillery operators to dynamically shift their fire directly onto the new infantry positions. The Russian soldiers desperately fired their small arms upward to shoot down the mechanical predators, but their muzzle flashes only acted as signal flares for the overhead surveillance drones. Each flash allowed the Ukrainian operators to calculate exact coordinates, refining the artillery strikes with terrifying accuracy and ensuring no survivor could find a safe place to hide. Desperate to regain control, the Russian column commander increased his radio transmission power to maximum to cut through the electronic noise. This spike in electromagnetic energy was exactly what Ukrainian electronic warfare teams were waiting for. They immediately triangulated the signal's origin point with a margin of error of less than 10 meters. A specialized strike drone was redirected to this invisible beacon, plummeting directly into the command vehicle. This surgical strike severed the head of the Russian tactical operation, leaving the remaining forces leaderless and in a state of absolute operational paralysis. In a final attempt to save the dying assault force, Russian artillery units located miles behind the front lines began firing blind suppression barrages. However, this triggered a lethal automated response from Ukrainian counter-battery radar systems. These systems tracked the incoming Russian shells mid-flight, calculated their precise trajectories, and pinpointed the exact location of the enemy cannons. Within 45 seconds of the Russian guns firing, Ukrainian counter-battery fire was already in the air, obliterating the Russian artillery positions before the crews could even begin to relocate their heavy equipment. By the time the engagement clock struck exactly 6 minutes, the once feared elite armored column had been reduced to a miles-long graveyard of burning metal. The surviving Russian infantry, stripped of their leadership, equipment, and artillery support, abandoned their disabled vehicles and began a chaotic retreat on foot through the mud. Ukrainian commanders deliberately ordered their forces to halt any pursuit, choosing instead to maintain absolute control over the kill zone while drones recorded the high-definition aftermath. The entire assault had been meticulously dismantled by compressing the enemy's decision-making time to zero. This engagement exposed a terrifying new reality of modern warfare: the side that controls the flow of information dominates the battlefield. By integrating satellites, acoustic sensors, and autonomous drones into a single unified kill chain, Ukrainian forces rendered raw physical mass useless. The tactical patience to wait for the perfect moment, coupled with the technological capacity to strike without warning, transformed a localized engagement into a massive strategic disruption. Ultimately, victory no longer favors the military with the most steel, but the one that can process battlefield data the fastest and blind their opponent before the first shot is fired.